Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. This week I am joined by Amanda Vernon, and I'm so excited that I got to have this conversation with her about toxic NFP culture and what we can do about that and how to recognize really what toxic NFP culture is in our parishes and in our community. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, we are welcoming Amanda Vernon to the podcast. Amanda, I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Could you just start by giving us a little introduction? I think some of our listeners don't know anything about you and your fabulous singing voice. You don't have to sing on the podcast. But...
la, 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 yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm a full-time recording artist. My husband and I support our family of 6 through my music, and we use my music for evangelization. So I desire that my songs would transmit the joy of the Lord. And I up until a year ago was on tour full time. And so 15 days of the month, I would be on the road, mostly visiting Catholic communities, parishes, retreats, but also going to universities and coffee shops and different venues as well, sharing my music and sharing my faith. And so now here we are in the digital terrain, the digital life, living in a digital world. Is that a parody yet? But
should be.
So it's been quite the shift for me to go from like performing live for a lot of people to never doing that. And yet I'm finding that God has given me a lot of opportunities to record music and to still share my faith with a lot of people, sometimes even more people than I would have before this situation in which we find ourselves at the filming of this podcast. But yeah, we're continuing by the grace of God.
Oh, praise God. I mean, yeah, this gave us all an opportunity to stop everything that we were doing.
Yeah.
And trust in the Lord. Like,
Amen.
really trust.
Yes.
And he is so good. He is so good to us.
Amen.
Oh my goodness. So you had a fabulous video in NFP week of 2020 that I listened to, and I was like, I watched it, I guess. I listened to it too. I was like, wow, this is fabulous. This is the kind of content I want to have on my podcast. And then it took me about 9 months to work up the courage to ask you to come and talk about it on the podcast.
9 months is a fruitful span of time, right?
Yeah, that's the amount of time it takes to like grow.
Gave me 9 months of just nurturing something. Just a second.
This video was fabulous. We're going to link it in the show notes, everyone. You should absolutely watch it. But we are definitely going to talk about a lot of the things that she mentioned in the video, but it was about toxic NFP culture. So I would love to just start out by defining how you would define toxic NFP culture.
Mm-hmm. I would say toxic NFP culture is a misrepresentation of church teaching around morality and sexuality. When that misrepresentation is perpetuated, I think you get a culture that is unhealthy.
Absolutely. And I think that is a lot of the reason why there is kind of this exciting, not necessarily resurgence, but surgence without the re. I don't know what that word is.
We're doing this for the first time, really, people.
Is people are really starting to wake up to this. And they're like, hey, when we are sitting in marriage prep and somebody is literally lying to us saying, well, you're only going to abstain for like a week and it's going to be perfect and your marriage is going to be wonderful. That's a problem. And, you know, we're really starting to wake up to this, and there are just some really incredible people opening up this conversation. I mean, that's the point of this podcast, is bringing people on to open up this conversation and talk about, like, you know, these kind of things are a problem, and we need to fix them. And here's what we can do instead of, you know, talking about these things. So what would you say are some examples of that toxic NFP culture?
Yeah, I mean, I have a list. It's kind of like a litany, which I described.
We can pray through it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Which I described in my essay. I also have it's just up on a blog, my video that you watched. I wrote it out in text as well, at amandavernon.com if people want to check out my blog. But I think for me, I have more personal examples of what I've seen that I categorize as toxic NFP culture. And so I would say, like, when people present NFP without talking about God, without talking about God's love, and especially, which I think happens even more often, without talking about the cross. There's no mention of sacrifice, hardship at all. And yet we're still promoting NFP. That is textbook NFP culture.
Yes, I completely agree. Like, I mentioned this in an episode before, like, NFP doesn't actually make sense if you don't talk about the theology behind it. Like, it kind of just looks like this really hard thing. Which it is hard. I mean, we are completely honest about that on the podcast.
Right.
But, there is good that comes from it. There is good that comes from suffering. You know, there's so many things in our Catholic church that we learn about, you know, redemptive suffering and
right. Do you mind if I interject?
Absolutely.
Right. I would say even before we talk about the hardship that is the practice of NFP or the discipline of NFP, there's hardship in the marriage that causes us to seek out a method to alleviate that suffering in our experience of sexuality. And that is where I'm saying, like, let's look at that first. Even like before we talk about what it's like to actually follow the discipline of NFP, I feel like I never hear conversations about, like, what is the suffering that causes us to need to space our pregnancies? What is the suffering that causes a couple who hasn't been able to conceive to try to seek a way to conceive? What is the suffering that is that is, you know, being bombarded by medical advice that goes against your faith and feeling like NFP doesn't even work for you, and you've already had like 3 babies when you're trying to practice, you know, like that. I'm talking about like the root suffering that I feel like I see why we don't want to talk about it, because it is painful and it's easier just like jump to a solution. But what I'm saying is, when we talk about a solution without actually acknowledging the problem that we're trying to address, we get lost. And I think that is evident even in our church culture today.
Oh my gosh. I totally agree. You're bringing up such a good point. I don't even think I've really thought through that. But I think, like, where we could see it going is if we really do start with, you know, this root struggle. You know, we can see so much fruit from it, of just a natural understanding and adoption of the need for NFP. You know, there isn't, then there wouldn't be this need to like sell it like a
Promote
used car
it.
salesman.
Right. Right.
Because
Look at
if
this
we're
thing over
really,
here.
if we're really talking about that root cause,
Yes.
then it fits like a puzzle piece.
Right. Like, let's talk about the suffering involved in marriage, specifically within sexuality and fertility. Okay. Hopefully our prayer is that couples wouldn't have to even have that conversation. Perhaps there's no grave suffering. Perhaps fertility is only a joy for them.
Right. And wouldn't that be amazing?
That would be amazing. And that's our like baseline as a church, is like God's command, be fertile and multiply. Wonderful. That's where we begin this conversation. But because of our human condition, because of sin, which has led to suffering in the world, often our sexuality, our fertility is wrought with strife. And then it's in that moment that we say, okay, what do we do about that suffering? And the church says one way to navigate this can be natural family planning. But you see how it kind of flips the even, I was going to say the method, but the process of getting to that conclusion. And that's for me where like my heart was when I made this statement about toxic NFP cultures. I was saying like, well, can we talk to those who are, they're in the midst of their suffering right now? Can we talk about that first? Because that is the Christian life of proclaiming Christ crucified, of Christ comes into our ache and our poverty and our dependency on him. And he says, yeah, right, I'm here with you, and he walks with us.
Right. Oh man, I don't even have like a response to that. I'm just saying.
Thanks. I can tell you some more about toxic NFP culture.
Let's do some more examples.
yeah, more examples. Okay, here's one. I'm just like scrolling through it. Toxic NFP culture says NFP is not complicated. Ellen, have you heard people say this?
Oh my gosh. Like, why does someone say that?
Because, well, here's the thing. This is my analysis after, just discussing with, a number of people growing up Catholic, trying to understand. I'm pretty sure that most proponents of NFP who are like vocal about it, it's probably easier for them than the average person. And because for some people it won't be complicated. Just
right. For some people have perfect textbook cycles.
Right.
And that is fabulous if that's you.
Yeah, exactly. Just as we were saying, like, maybe you don't even have a need to regulate your fertility because it happens naturally. You nurse your baby, and for 2 years, your cycles don't return, and your children are naturally spaced every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, that's my mom. Great. If that's
serious.
You, that's fabulous if that's you. But
yeah, no kidding. It's like, that's beautiful.
That's not.
And I don't want to. Yeah, and I don't want it to. Say that somebody who has babies every 7 months is like, how did that even happen? No, just kidding. But like really close together. Oh, side note, I did meet this couple whose kids were like, I want to say 10 months apart. And I was like,
that's quick.
Yeah. And the husband's talking about it. You could tell they love to talk. They're like an elderly couple now. They're like, he's like, it was her fault.
Okay, hold on. Can we just pause there for a second? I cannot stand. I think they were saying it in a joking way, but I cannot stand when it's apparently the wife's fault.
Yes.
When there's an unintended pregnancy, it's like, okay, this is shared fertility.
Yeah. It has to be a joke. I mean, it has to be a joke, because if it's not a joke, then that's not, I think that's why it's funny. It's because of, obviously, but you do bring up a good point. Wait, I'm gonna put this in my back pocket. Let's talk about how it's the wife's fault, quote unquote, in a little bit. But I want to talk about this, how NFP is not complicated as a tenet of toxic NFP culture, right? Because, okay, perhaps there's somebody who they did have a struggle in needing to space out their children for any reason. And then they're like, wow, this is working so well. Like it's free of cost. I just have to
we'll get into
mark
that too.
I just had to mark down my, readings every day, and boom, it's, it's easy. But when it's promoted like that, first, I have two problems with that stand out at first. One is that it's not the experience of most women, because most women's cycles are not that predictable. Secondly, it negates the suffering, it negates the cross, because to say like it's not complicated, you're also ignoring the interpersonal dynamic between the spouses, like as though abstinence, I'm talking like even if you're like, you only have to abstain a week, okay, but wait, what if that's very difficult in your marriage? Like, are we just saying like it's like, or even to say that it's simple, like perhaps it's doable, but it still presents complexity, right? And so, man, I just feel like to gloss over that is really disheartening for somebody who does face a lot of complexity, not to mention difficulty.
Right. And then it makes the average user, I guess, for lack of a better term, it makes the average user who does struggle with one or more of those things feel like there's something wrong.
Yeah, it definitely can put a strain. It definitely is not encouraging, right? I mean, it's hard enough to try and live the church's teachings, but then when you have a segment of the church culture that is saying to you, talking to you about that subject, which is already difficult, and saying like, oh, by the way, this is not difficult. It's like, it just feels like it adds injury to insult. Is that the insult to injury? There it is. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, as a Catholic church culture, does anybody say Lent is easy? No. Like, if we're going to truly practice Lent and, like give up something and turn towards God more, like we're going to suffer in some way. And we talk truthfully about that. And so then you're prepared.
Right. Ellen, where I think I see that the most, some like a similar attitude, is when we talk about going through any spiritual test by our own strength. And so, no, we would never say Lent is easy, but I do hear very often, like, we're going to do Lent. This is going to be my best Lent. This is going to be as though it's like up to me what kind of Lent I'm going to have.
I'm going to have the best Lent ever. It's like,
right.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Actually, God's going to work with you on that. Like,
right. Or like, we just got to be stronger this year. We just got like, when we put ourselves in the position of like directing our own spiritual life, and it's as though I told a friend the other day, it's almost like it's a heresy I think it's a heresy of Pelagianism, which for anybody who's like unfamiliar with that term, the way I think of it as it's a teaching about God, which is not in line with the Catholic Church, and yet it's very evident in many conversations around the church now. And so Pelagianism says that God has given us all grace, and then it's up to us to use that grace in the way that we see fit. And our successfulness in the life of faith depends on our effort now. This is not church teaching.
Yeah.
Right. And yet it sounds really good. It sounds very American, right? Like it's very much like
you're kind of listening to it and you're like, yeah, this is like, this is our American culture.
Exactly. It's kind of like this pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, sort of like land of opportunity, like applied to the faith. It's like it's almost saying like we all have an opportunity to live in God's grace because he's given us his grace. So now go out and live that life, right?
It's up to us to live that life.
It's up to us, exactly. And so
I think I've heard that too. Like,
absolutely.
Just like talking in Catholic circles, or even just like hearing. I mean, I don't want to get into this too much, but just hearing like preachers from other Christian religions,
everywhere.
Like, they're like, it's up to us to do this, and it's like it's up to God. Like,
I mean, I heard it in a lot of Catholic places too, from the pulpit as well, and I know that I believe it's not ill intended, but it seeps in so easily because that's so much part of our secular culture, and so. It's, maybe, what's another word for it? Prosperity gospel, right? Is along those lines. It's like, if you work really hard at your faith, like God is going to bless you abundantly in these ways, right? That, name it and claim it. Now, the reason why it's so appealing as well is because it has a lot of truth in it, but yet, like bringing this back to how it applies to NFP, I think when we talk about like, a spiritual practice, in this case, discipline within sexuality. And we say like that it's up to us as individuals, up to us as a couple to live that out. Then you're taking the focus off of God and what God is allowing and what God is calling you to do and what God is going to bring you through. And you put that responsibility squarely on your own shoulders and say like, now I know what I need to do. I know what steps I need to follow. Got it.
Right. And honestly, like that puts a lot of stress on our lives. Like, I mean, I remember like graduating college and some friends of mine, like were reading this book about how, your 20s have to be the best decade and you have to do all of these things. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, that sounds like so much work. Like, and then I realized, I like stepped back and I was like, you know what? No, I don't have to do that. Like, I just need to trust in God. I just need to follow where he's telling me to go.
Amen.
And that's going to lead to a prosperous life. We're starting to do like a motivational talk here.
No, but that's the gospel. And that is what I'm interested in proclaiming to people, Ellen. It's like, this is good news that God has come to save us. And like, we don't have to save ourselves. Like, like this, like people need to hear that. They've always needed to hear that. And today is no exception. And so that's beautiful. Yes. Preach it.
All right. I'll keep going. Oh my gosh. Well, and one of the things you mentioned, I jotted this down when I watched your video again, is like kind of going back to like defining that toxic NFP culture. It's like mentioning NFP without the mention of our utter dependence on God can create that toxic NFP culture because, like what I said, like NFP doesn't make sense without the background. Like, doesn't make sense without God.
Right. Exactly. And you wouldn't know it based on most of, if not all of the literature that I've seen around NFP. Now, I do not, when I say that, I mean, not directly from like the Vatican or church teachings, right? Because that's where we get the truth of these teachings, but in the way that it is communicated then.
Yes. Like
to
just
the
kind
faithful.
Of misunderstanding and misinterpretation of some of those documents, I think in some cases, because we're human, because we're not perfect. Can lead to that, simple miswording, simple misunderstanding of some of the things that are in Humana Vitae.
Right. And I gotta say it's more than, I think it's more than misunderstandings, because this is a spiritual battle that we're in. And in our vocations, we're called to God's love, and we have an enemy. And so like when we're looking at renewing our marriage vows in the marital act, of course the devil is against that.
Mm-hmm.
This act that not only binds us together as husband and wife, but can bring new life into the world. Like, of course that's battleground in the spiritual realm. And so something that might just seem like, oh, this is, maybe it's not being communicated super well, but we're doing our best. Yeah, like we have to realize, like, when we go to speak about these things, like the devil's going to be trying to misconstrue our words. And what more devious way could you think of than like actually promoting what the church is saying and then having that get twisted up in a way that causes more harm?
Oh man, you're blowing my mind right now. Oh my gosh. Yes. I mean, like we need to realize, like this is a huge battleground. Like this is like the battleground. This is bringing life, which is the opposite of what the devil wants.
Exactly.
Like, and the unity of persons, again, opposite of what the devil wants. And so we have an act that does those two things. And those two things are equally the primary purpose of this act. Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Of course the devil's going to try to twist that around. He's going to try to mess it up. He's going to take the culture and say, oh, look, it's just a meaningless, it's the same as giving someone a hug, same as giving somebody a kiss. Like it's just what you do when you're like going steady with someone. I don't know the lingo of kids these days.
I don't know if kids see each other in person anymore anyway.
That's true. Hey, maybe this is a good thing.
Well, yes, maybe it is a good thing. Yes. And then, so it's, not only is there a battleground because of the sacredness of marriage and the marital act, but also because, in the Bible, the image of a husband's love for his wife is God's primary example of his love for us. Mm-hmm. And so if the devil can distort that, if we don't understand the beauty and the joy and the free gift of love between a husband and wife, how could we hope to have an openness to God's love if we can't even understand the imagery? Mm-hmm. And so I just feel like this is, it's sacred ground when we go to speak about this. And my heart goes out to those who have never heard it in a way that's beautiful, mm-hmm. and in a way that acknowledges the depths of God's love.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this would be a great place to transition over to like, what can we do about this? But I think there's a few more examples of like toxic NFP culture that I want to like bring up before we transition over.
Yeah, please do.
But yeah, just one of the things that there's two big ones I want to talk about. When we talk about NFP without acknowledging the criticisms that exist around NFP. Like when we're like, oh no, it's fine. Like, it's great.
yeah, it's 90 whatever percent effective. And it's so, why wouldn't anybody use NFP? Like, you're not putting chemicals into your body. And I'm like, yeah, but what about the not having sex part?
Yeah.
Like, what? Doesn't anybody?
What about?
That? Does everybody have no problem with this? Like, what? Like, honestly, I don't understand how we can have this conversation without being like, oh yeah, some people do have a problem with the not having sex on the days that they most want to have sex. But
oh my gosh, no, I was giving an introduction class, and someone asked basically that question of like, wait, okay, so what I'm getting, from like the talk, like what I'm getting is like, isn't the woman's libido like highest around ovulation? And like, that's the time she's not supposed to have sex. And I'm like, yeah, let's dig into that. Yes. And let's talk about it. And it's hard. And like, yeah, we don't talk about that.
Not to mention that so many women have gotten pregnant when they're trying to use NFP, right? Mm-hmm. And then they stop using NFP. Have you ever thought about that? These statistics that we have, like it's 90% effective. Those are the people who keep using it, right? I have to presume, because the people who are like, yeah, deuces, no thanks, they're not on the chart anymore. On the chart. Oh, I'm so proud of myself. No,
that was good. That was a good one.
I have to believe that they are not part of that percentage anymore that's practicing NFP. Like I haven't been able to ask anybody about this, but I just can't imagine, because I know so many couples will start out using NFP. It doesn't work in their experience. And then they use a different method of postponing pregnancies, which is not natural, right? Mm-hmm. But like, to overlook that, I think, are we afraid that like if we say that, then nobody's gonna listen to the church's teaching? Well, guess what? Nobody's really listening anyway, so might as well tell them the truth.
Okay,
maybe it'll work better.
Seriously, like, okay, let's stop worrying that people aren't going to use NFP if we tell them the truth about it. Because guess what? They're not using NFP.
Guess what? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I shouldn't yell. I think I get a little too passionate.
No, this is good.
Sorry, guys, your ears are probably ringing.
We need that. We need that passion. Man.
But seriously, like, there is no point in trying to sugarcoat this, because sugarcoating it isn't working. Mm-hmm. There's like, I mean, the percentage is drastically low. It's like 20%, maybe. That might even be too high.
Of what?
Of like Catholic couples that use NFP.
Using 20%? I thought it was 3.
It might be way less. I don't know. No, maybe I'm being optimistic here. I'm thinking about my friends. I'm thinking about my Catholic friends.
Your friends are
20%
really awesome.
of them. Yeah.
Your friends are especially awesome. Let me look. I'm pretty sure I researched this in my little talk that you saw about toxic NFP culture, but I'm pretty sure it's more like, let me look it up.
Well, and the problem is like these surveys too are completely flawed. Like, so it could be like 1%. Like,
this is what I heard. 98% of all Catholic women have used contraception.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that harkens back to more than just a toxic culture around NFP. I mean, that harkens back to just the culture within our doctors' offices.
Absolutely. This is a
bigger problem then.
This is a bigger problem. And my whole issue with the way that we present the solution is that we're keeping people from receiving the truth when we give them only half the truth. Because like, I want to give people a little more credit to realize, like, when they're hearing something that's not completely true, they're justifiably not gonna be excited about that.
Right. I mean, who wants like a half truth about anything? Like, I'm not going to give you a book that has a terrible ending and just be like, oh my gosh, like this book is incredible.
Now, okay. Now, if that half of a book promised immense pleasure, maybe, yeah. Like, okay, because you look at like contraception, and that's, I think that my guess is that many women could admit that it's not like the most healthy thing for us, like take the pill, right? And yet here's the whole list of why this would be good for your lifestyle, for your, for your sexual experiences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then you have NFP, and like, what is the selling points, right? Like, if we're trying to sell anything in the church, if we're trying to sell anything in the church, I think we're doing it wrong. Like,
right, the church is not a used car that we're like going, hey, it's, it's incredible. Like the church is a luxury vehicle. And like those things don't need to be sold. Right? You just talk about it and people want it. Right? You talk about the truth of the luxury vehicle and people are like, yeah, I want that.
I love it.
We just talk about
a great analogy.
I've been using this analogy a lot. So the people listening to the podcast, like, you're hearing this used car salesman thing like all the time.
Yeah, I'm looking at this quote that it's by Pope Benedict XVI, and he said, I don't want to misquote him. I'm pretty sure he said the church does not grow by proselytization, but by attraction. The Catholic Church. I'm gonna search this. So, yeah. What else should we talk about in the meantime while I get this quote up here?
I think this kind of goes right along with what we're saying, but another one that you mentioned is like promoting NFP just as an alternative to birth control.
Oh, right.
And just saying like, oh yeah, this is just like another option that you have.
And
it's like, no, actually it's not.
Yeah, exactly. I had a friend of mine who, she and her fiance were in their marriage prep course, and they told them about NFP, and he was like, it sounds exactly like contraception, so let's use contraception instead. Like,
oh my gosh.
That's a logical conclusion on his part. I don't fault him for that. Because again, when the conversation is about like what we get out of it, right? You're like, here are the benefits of NFP, and you try to put those side by side with contraception. You can space out your pregnancies, right? But you're trying to say, but it's more natural. And you look at the cost involved, and you say it's free. I know you're saying like,
oh my gosh.
Not only then does somebody like say in marriage prep look at that and say, yeah, but first of all, I have to not have sex. I'm just going to keep saying this. Like, seriously, you have to not have sex on the days when you most want to have sex. Like that. And then,
yeah.
And then, but on top of that, it's like, it takes a lot of attention to detail. It takes going to classes. If you can't figure it out because you're hyper fertile, or as I like to say, super fertile, then you might have to like talk with your doctor. It's involved. And if you just kind of are looking at those side by side, why would you not choose contraception?
Right. Like if you're not understanding like the true meaning of sex and the sexual union, and understanding that like the two parts of sex, unity and procreation, like cannot be separated. And if you're really understanding that and digesting that, and we're really talking about it, we're not just like mentioning it quickly and then like moving on.
Yes.
That's when you really see the difference between the two. And you understand that birth control is like, it's not going to be an option because it completely destroys what sex is. But we have to get to that point. Like, people aren't just going to figure that out for themselves because we don't talk about it. I mean, if this was common knowledge, if we just talked about this in our churches, in the homilies, in our religious ed classes, yes, our religious ed classes with our kids in an age-appropriate manner. Like, there are age-appropriate ways to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Like, if this was common, then yeah, we wouldn't have to do anything. I mean, we already mentioned that at the beginning of the podcast. Like, if we wouldn't need to promote NFP if everybody understood it fully and completely.
Yes. Then it could be, as the church offers, a remedy to suffering.
Right. It is NFP is a gift. And we've mentioned this on the podcast too, just talking about like NFP as a gift. And a lot of times we don't see it as a gift because, you know, we're focusing on the hard parts of it. And yes, the hard parts exist, but the church gives us NFP to help us in that suffering. Like,
yes. And once you start from there, then you're like, then you could look on the bright side about it. Like,
right.
You know, I was really suffering and this helps in so many ways.
Right. Cause it's like, if you're really truly understanding, like, there is a reason why we're not adding to our family right now. Like, there is a true reason for that. And what a gift it is that I have the opportunity to still be able to come together with my husband at some points.
Right.
Even though, yes, like right now I'm in my most fertile time and I really want to come together with him, but I understand that coming together with him also means the possibility of creating another life. And there's a reason that we've discerned why that's not a good time right now. You know, like, if you're really thinking about it that way, it starts to make sense. It doesn't get any easier, but it starts to make sense. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, you said it. Oh, I found the quote.
Oh,
it's almost exactly as I said.
You're right.
It's Pope Benedict XVI. The church grows not through proselytism, but through attraction, through witness.
Oh, beautiful. I mean, yes. Like, when we show the true beauty of our faith, like, that's when people are attracted. Like, I mean, people are attracted to beauty. We're human. Like, we were designed to be attracted to beauty. Like, yeah, I can't even say anymore.
Beautiful. Okay. Yes, we did say we're going to come back to the fact that, like, when people say, like, it's the wife's fault.
Oh man.
Yeah. I do. One of my friends, some of my single friends were telling me that when they hear about NFP, now these are friends who are very faithful, who are young, beautiful, like old enough to get married, but who observe what I call toxic NFP culture within the church. And they're like, they say that makes it seem like the wife is sort of like in a mom role with her husband. Like, she's like making the rules and like setting the parameters as far as like when they can come together and when they can't. And like, it's like all her responsibility. And I think that goes along with saying then, like, if she gets pregnant, well, it was her fault. Like, and why I say, like, it has to be a joke is, like, if it's not a joke,
then there's a serious problem.
Yeah, it was a serious problem.
There's some like couples counseling that needs to happen. Yeah, if that's not a joke.
Yeah, but I do think that we can easily sort of fall into that kind of thinking again when it's not about what God is calling us to and what God is empowering us, how he's empowering us to love, but rather something that's our own responsibility, alone. Then I do think that the the bulk of that responsibility ends up with the woman. And let's talk about God's love instead.
Right. Well, and okay, here's the thing is it's just like, it's not well communicated that this is like, has to be a partnership. Because like what ends up happening is like the woman sort of becomes like this gatekeeper of sex.
Right.
Which I can tell you is one of the worst things in the whole world. Like that's partially how like my husband and I's NFP journey started. Like it was literally, I was the gatekeeper. It was like, like, can we have sex tonight? No, we can't. Like all I was saying was no.
Yeah.
And instead, like it needs to be a conversation. Like most of the time, like the husband is supposed to come to those NFP classes. Like that's what's encouraged, like in most, like in the method that I teach, like it's partners, like you guys come together. Like this is not, I won't teach a woman unless she's like single.
Right.
You know, I'd be happy to teach a single woman, but like I won't teach a woman who's married by herself.
Yeah.
Because like then there's like an understanding of like you can look at the chart together. Or the husband can just look at the chart by himself and be like, okay, I kind of know what's going on. All right, probably gonna be another couple days realistically, you know, or whatever. And yeah, like that partnership is key. And there's like tons of people who are like, oh yeah, like make the guy chart down the sign or like do that. And like, okay, sure, that might work for some couples, but like, no, I'm the one writing down the signs. I'm the one writing down the temperature. Like, yes, the majority of the burden's going to fall on the woman because we are tracking the woman's fertility. We don't have to track the guy's fertility because his fertility is constant.
Yeah, his fertility is constant. Congratulations, guys.
Good for you.
But, yeah. That's so funny. Advantages and disadvantages.
To take an active role.
Yeah.
In understanding, in interpreting, in conversing about.
So you're saying it doesn't, that the way that that role is shared is going to look different for different couples.
Exactly.
But the point is that it has to be shared. Right.
And you find out what works for you as a couple and you talk about it. Like that was the beginning of the healing. Like in my relationship with Kurt, like it was like, okay, this is too hard for me. It's too hard for me to just keep saying no to you.
Right.
And then we like kind of sat down and talked about it. We're like, oh yeah. And he kind of, then he saw that because he had no idea. Like he just thought he was just kidding because he wanted to be with me as my husband, you know?
Yeah.
It was a good desire of him to want to have sex with me, but like, it wasn't the right kind of communication. It wasn't working. Right. And so, yeah, I think one of the beautiful gifts that NFP like forces is like some hard conversations and some good, deep conversations. Like, I mean, I guess it doesn't force it, but it allows you the opportunity to. And if you take those, then those can be so beneficial.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. I think another part of toxic NFP culture is that we can overlook those couples who are not on the same page. Like, what is a woman supposed to do if her husband is not interested in NFP? And we don't have time to like get into that conversation right now, or vice versa. Like I know a couple who, you know, they got married in the Catholic Church, but the wife was like, no, I'm using contraception. Okay. Like what is he to do? That is that's a pastoral conversation. That's a one-on-one perhaps conversation between that dude and his pastor or his spiritual director or something. But like when we talk about NFP without talking about the suffering, or that it can be a helpful practice in the midst of suffering, then See, then we're like glossing over those who are still like in the midst of it,
right,
in the midst of their suffering. Because even what you described right now, like your husband approaching you and, you know, like wanting to be with you, and being willing to talk to you, like that is a huge gift.
right.
Like, whereas like other couples are not necessarily even gonna be in that dynamic, you know? And so I feel like I just want to encourage anyone who is listening, who is like, man, I wish my spouse would talk to me about anything that has to do with sex. With like, those are conversations it feels like we can't have. And just to let that person know who's listening that God is with you, and that the church is rooting for you. I'm rooting for you. Ellen's rooting for you.
I am.
And that, you know, this isn't the end of the story wherever you find yourself now, that faith is a journey, and that, you know, that God is patient and merciful and always calling you to him in the way that you're able to respond today.
Oh, that's beautiful. A beautiful affirmation for those who are suffering in that way. Okay. Oh my gosh, we've been talking for so long. It's been such a good conversation.
There's so much to talk about.
There's so much to talk about in this. We should definitely move on, and like also maybe we should end the podcast. I don't know.
How are we gonna end?
I don't even know. We're just gonna keep talking for hours and hours. Yeah, we'll be like catching foxes. Like sometimes they have like 3-hour episodes. Holy moly. 3 hours to listen to a podcast. So that's the direction that
especially of just
going.
Dudes.
I know. I don't want to listen to 2 guys talk for 3 hours. Yeah.
Kidding. We love you guys. Thanks for listening.
You guys are great. Foxes. If you're listening to my podcast, then clearly something, I don't know, I did something right. Okay. So like, what can we do about this? How can we heal? What kind of conversations can we have? Like what do we do about this toxic NFP culture?
I think we're doing it right now.
What?
This is it. We're being honest. As honest. I'm trying to be as honest as I can be about my own feelings about NFP, and like I think really just again going back to when I see that nobody is really acknowledging the suffering in this realm when they bring up NFP. Well, if I notice that, then maybe it's my job. Maybe I'm noticing it because like I'm called to say something. So that's why I'm here doing this interview with you, even though I told you, I'm like, I don't really consider myself like a,
you're like, I don't really talk about NFP.
I'm not really a fan even. I don't really like it. I understand why it's necessary, but like, like I'm not like, yeah, NFP everyone. I just normally am not but because I've noticed that there is really some unaddressed pain here, then I'm just doing my best to speak to that. And I feel like maybe that's what we can do, just one conversation at a time. And ultimately this is the Lord's church. I mean, it's his body that we're part of.
Right.
And like if he's calling us to honor him in our sexuality, and we believe like this, that the church outlines what that means, then it's up to the Lord to lead us, And so I'm just gonna respond as an individual and pray that God works that together with the body of Christ.
Oh, that is beautiful. And that's where everything starts, is with just each person speaking the truth. That's how Christianity, Catholicism was spread.
Yeah.
Was from a handful of guys went and talked about it to people, and they were honest about it. In letters.
Can't forget it. Oh, no. Oh, yeah, in letters. I was going to say, and women. Mary.
Oh, and women.
Apostle.
Right.
I think it's like women encouraging men to not be afraid and to follow Jesus. That's the story of Christianity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of how it was passed along.
I mean, like, even Mary had to like tell Jesus, like, okay, dude, it's time.
Yes.
Like, right? Like at the wedding of Cana, he's like, she's like, Jesus, you gotta do something about this. And he's like, no, I don't. Like,
I love that. Jesus is like, let me model for you in my own family how this is gonna go for you guys. Mom, say the line.
Say the line, here we go. I know, that's so true. Like, yeah, women encouraging men to not be afraid, because we're not afraid. We birth children. I mean, like, we do some crazy stuff.
Oh man, by the grace of God, we do.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, just finding those opportunities to talk honestly about your experience, whether it's with a friend, whether it's with just in your family, your teenage children, or younger in age appropriate ways, again. Mm-hmm. Or opening up and having that conversation with your spouse. That's a great place to start too. Going beyond that, talking to your pastor. Hey, can I encourage you to talk about NFP?
I'm telling you, if you do that, he's going to tell you to do it. I mean, he's not going to tell you to do the homily, but he's going to be like, yeah, you can give a talk.
Yeah. That's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They always do that. Just good.
No, I mean, like,
pastorally thing to do.
The worst thing that's going to happen is he's going to say no. So
he's not going to say no. I'm telling you, he's not going to say no.
He's not going to say no. He's going to make you
later. Tell me on social media, Amanda Vernon Music. I'm on Instagram. You can go to my website. Let me, if your priest is like, no, I don't want you to talk about NFP. Like, I want to meet him because he's one of a kind.
We'll go march down to your parish. Amanda and I will go together, sit down in his office, and
we'll at least call. Over Zoom.
That's true. We'll have a Zoom call with him.
Excuse us. We will. I will. I'm good for that.
Oh my gosh. Oh, what a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for your honesty, for your openness, for sharing your true feelings about NFP. Like, exactly what we said. Like, we need more of this. We need the true, honest, raw feelings about NFP. We need the people who don't like it to talk about why they don't like it. Mm-hmm. And then let's have a conversation around there. Mm-hmm. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. We don't have to pretend to like something we don't like. I mean, like, honestly, I don't really like Lent. Yeah. I don't. But I'm Catholic, and I understand that there is such redemptive suffering, in me giving up chocolate, which is like, I know it's not even that big of a deal.
That's like a huge deal to me, actually.
I didn't even give up chocolate this year. What am I talking about? That was a couple years ago. Yeah. I couldn't do chocolate.
2021, we're not going to part with chocolate.
Yeah, we are not giving up chocolate. I think last year I was like giving up sweets, and then
the pandemic,
and I was like,
we're going to change up our Lenten sacrifice. For Lent, I'm going to deal with the pandemic.
Yeah. That's basically,
I think that's valid. So,
yeah. Anyway.
All right. Well,
oh my gosh.
Thank you again for having me. I'm honored. And thank you for the work that you're doing to facilitate honest discussions. I heard Joe on your show. On your show. Joe Nufable. And now he's going to be a dad. And it's like so awesome. And anyway, once I was like, let me check out this show. Because I got your like email or whatever. I'm like, let's see what's going on. And then I saw Joe in the chat. Joe's on here. I want to be on this show. And
if Joe Nufable is on a show, then like,
then it's it's legit. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make sure you listen to this episode. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. This has been fabulous.
All right. You're welcome.
Thanks so much for listening. links to Amanda's blog and the video that we talk about, as well as Amanda's website, are going to be in the show notes. If you are not already following us on Instagram, please check us out at Charting Toward Intimacy on Instagram. Reach out if you have comments, questions. You can also email me. Again, links to those are going to be in the show notes. Until next time.